Hey friends, how's it going? And welcome to the third part of the series. So in the previous video, I talked about how to bind tableView cell with combined framework, and I talked about how we can transform the MVC app into the MVVM architecture. And in this video, I want to continue on this series and to show you how I can structure unit tests to test all the implementation in our shopping app. Alright, so this video is going to be pretty technical, and if you have not watched the first two videos, I highly recommend that you do that first, starting with part 1 of 3 and then part 2 of 3. Otherwise you're going to get completely lost and this video will have no benefit to you at all. Alright, so please watch those things first. Okay, so I want to first continue by going back to the view model, because as explained, the view model's purpose is to handle all the business logic. So for example, when we receive input A, what are we expected to spit out? What is the output that is supposed to go out? And we verify that those outputs are correct. Alright, so I want to show you what are the additions that I have changed inside the view model so that I can make this testable. So as mentioned, why do we use MVVM? Because mostly MVC is not testable code. Alright, so we use the view model to basically abstract the logic out into a different layer. Alright, so let's come to the view model over here and let's see what we have here. Okay, so as you can see here, I added a new product service over here. So product service is a protocol, and this protocol actually fetches products. This is an asynchronous function which returns an array of product. So why do I do that? Okay, so maybe let me just first come here to show you what has changed. Okay, so over here you notice that in the transform method, when we receive the view load input from the view controller, previously what we did was I used a dispatch queue to simulate an API call. We introduced like a half a second delay, and then we send the set products output with a bunch of product array. Alright, so notice that this is not testable code, and therefore I had to wrap the fetch products implementation into another class, okay, and have it conform to the protocol. So if you see over here, what I've done is that I've created the product service, and then inside the initializer, we have product service as a dependency, okay, or rather line 24 means that product service is a dependency, and we introduce something over here. So if this is unfamiliar to you, this is called dependency injection, whereby anyone who initializes this view model can put in or inject the implementation that conforms to the protocol. Alright, so over here I've created this product service implementation. Maybe let's get to this first. Okay, so product service implementation conforms to product service, which means this class has to have this function over here. So this is exactly this over here, and what I did over here is, again, to simulate the API call, I introduced a 1 second delay, and the way to do that is this. So obviously because this is inside the new await async function, you cannot do dispatch queue over here. Xcode is going to complain. Alright, so you can't do dispatch.main.async after. Alright, so this will fail. So this is the way to do that. And then once 1 second has passed, we return the product collection, which is basically the bunch of products inside the array. Okay, so let's get back. So once view deload is being caught, we wrap the function in the task block, and then what do? We basically just get the products from product service, and then we send it out inside the set products event. Okay, so this should be easy to understand. Okay, what else have I changed? Let's see. Okay, over here inside the VC, I believe if you look at the change over here, okay, so previously this was the line. Okay, so vm.transform, what I did here is that I added this thing called received on dispatch queue. Alright, so this is a combined way of setting this to the main thread. Okay, if we don't do it this way, let's assume I don't do it this way, I can also do it this way as well, dispatch queue.main.async, and just throw everything inside over here. Alright, okay, so but this is the more graceful way to do that, so I'm going to undo this and just add the received on function over here. Okay, so we are good with this. Now let's get back to the test code. All right, so let's come to the test file over here. So as you can see, we have a final class. Why do I use final? Is because we know that there's no subclassing involved, and final basically optimizes your code compilation time, all right, because it lets the compiler know that, hey, we don't have to take care of any subclassing. Okay, so over here, notice that I have two variables over here. I have SUT, and if you're wondering what is SUT, it stands for system under test. So it tells the reader of this file that what we are testing for is actually the view model. Okay, so you can argue that, actually, you don't have to put in SUT. Maybe you can call this view model, and then you can test for this view model. But let's assume if you have another service over here, some service, the person who is reading this test file is going to be wondering, what are you testing for? Are you testing for the product service, another service, or the view model? And therefore, good practice is just to use SUT, system under test. So exactly, we know that we are testing for the view model. Okay, so over here we do have the view VC output. So this is to simulate the VC spitting out events to the view model. And then we have the cancelable over here because we are doing some combine work over here. Okay, so inside the setup, I have I initialize this product service, but notice that I'm making this a mock, or rather I am setting this as a mock class. So let's come over here first. So guys, this particular video is quite difficult to explain because you're not going to learn unit testing in just watching a 15-minute or 20-minute video. What you need to do is really to dig into the code, which I'm going to upload this on GitHub. So feel free to check out the code and play with it and test the different variables. And then if you have questions, leave them in the comment section. But over here is mostly just an overview to show you how you can structure the code. Okay, so over here we have a product service mock which conforms to product service. All right, that means that I have to have this function over here, and I have a bunch of things inside over here which I'm going to explain subsequently. Right now, if I'm going to explain this, you're going to get confused, and you probably will have no idea why do I have an expectation here, why do I have a mock values over here. Okay, I'll come to that slightly later. Okay, so I initialize this product service mock because remember previously I mentioned that view model, when you initialize this, you can dependency inject a service. And therefore, I'm injecting this product service mock inside so that I can test for events that are happening inside the product service. For example, is the product service even being called to fetch the products, for example. All right, so over here, tear down. So basically, this is how we write the setup and teardown method. So setup is always being called when a test is being run. And once the test ends, we call the teardown method. And it's always good practice to set this to nil so that we kind of get a brand new state, a fresh state, okay? If you don't set this to nil and if you have some things inside the mocks, then your test is not going to be accurate. All right, guys, so let's come to the test scenarios over here. So when you write unit tests, this is a bit of science and art. There's really no hard and fast rules. And what you want to do is to really understand what your view model or your system under test is really doing in order for you to structure the test. Because if you're working professionally, you will have a CI that has some form of code coverage. And it's not uncommon for developers to write tests just to pass those code coverage, but those tests didn't really do anything, didn't really aid the reliability of the product. It's just to ensure that a certain function is being called so that the test coverage hits at least 50%, for example. So please don't do that, guys. Please understand why you're writing tests, because you write tests so that you can sleep soundly at night, so that during the weekends you don't get pager duty, you don't get messages on Slack, and you don't get woken up at 3 a.m. because there's something breaks on your app. All right, so let's first come to the view model and let's understand what the view model is doing, which is over here. Okay, so firstly, the way I see it is I firstly try to understand what are the inputs and what are the outputs and what the view model is trying to do. So we can get a clue inside this input.sync. So we know that, okay, when view deload happens, what are we expecting? We're expecting that product service will fetch the products. All right, and we know that after fetching the products, it's going to update the view. All right, so we can kind of say that, okay, when view deload happens, fetch products is being called. Okay, we can also think of it as when view deload happens, fetch products is being called. If fetch products returns a success, if backend returns a successful call 200, then the UI should be updated. All right, or when view deload happens and fetch products is being called, but backend returns some 400, then UI should return, should display maybe some kind of notification to say that, oh, there's an error happening. All right, so this is how you define those cases. Okay, so over here on reset button tab, okay, so this is, when reset button is being tapped, then I expect the cart to be resetted, which means I expect the number of items in cart as well as the total cost to be reset to 0. All right, so this is another way to think about this. Okay, so I've already defined some test cases over here. Firstly, let's define them in English. Okay, so the ones in checkmark are the ones that I've written. The ones 4, 5, 6, I've not written that, but those are good to have. And for a challenge, you can choose to write this. Okay, so firstly, when view deload happens on the view controller, fetch product API is being called. So notice over here, we didn't even check whether the API returns successful or not. Okay, we just need to know that when view deload happens, fetch product API is being called. So that's the first step. Okay, now the second test scenario is when fetch product happens successfully. So we assume that fetch products returns a bunch of product array. We want to ensure that the VC's view are being updated. Okay, so obviously we can't really check the VC's view unless you're running maybe a end-to-end test or a UI test, but we can ascertain that the output from the view model is spitting out the right values. So this is something that we can test for. All right, so the third scenario that we're going to test for is that when an item is added to cart, the VC cart quantity and cost should be updated. Are updated correctly. Okay, so these are the 3 tests that I'm going to show you how you can structure this. So the other test you can write for yourself is that when a particular item is light, the hard button is being shown on the table view cell. But obviously you can't test that, but you can test that the output is returning the right dictionary. Okay, when fetch product API returns an empty array. Okay, so this means that the API call is successful, which is 200 status code, but it's an empty array. Then we can test that the VC's table view shows some kind of recommendation to buy other products. So this could be a test case as well if you want to make this this view model very, very robust. Okay, when fetch product API fails, we receive a 400 4++ status code, then we can test that the VC shows some kind of error message and it allows the user to retry the API call. Again, these are things that we can do as well, but these are too much for me to do in one lesson, so I'm just going to focus on these 3 so that you can kind of know. It's to show you the structure of how you can test using combine. Okay, so now we're going to test the first one. When view deload happens, fetch API product is being called. So this is the reason why I transformed into that's why I created the fetch service protocol as well as the fetch service implementation, because this is the way we can test for it. Okay, so given that we have the output, so as you know, inside the view model we have the transform method which takes in an input. So what is this input? This input is the view model's input, which is the VC's output. So let's jump into the VC output here. Okay, so this VC output is actually, the type is the view model.input. Okay, so I hope that this is easy to understand. Okay, so what happens when an event happens, then we can this closure is actually being called. But since we don't need to monitor whatever that's happening inside the output, we are only interested to know what's happening inside the product service. Okay, so in fact you can do a switch over here if you want to, but we don't really care, so I'm going to do it this way instead. Okay, so when VC's output sends to the VM to say that, hey, view deload happens, what are we expecting? We're expecting that product service fetches the product. All right, it makes we want to check that the API call is being made. Whether it's pass or fail, we don't care. We want to know that it's being made. Okay, so how do we test for that? Let's go to product service. And what is product service? Product service is this product service mock. Okay, so inside this fetch products, I need to know that this breakpoint is being fired when view deload happens. But obviously, you can't put a breakpoint inside this test file and expect to assert that the breakpoint fires. What we do is that we can do something by creating a counter. So when product service mock is being initialized, the default counter is 0. But when fetch products is being called, obviously we can +1. Alright, so what that means is that we can do an assertion to ensure that fetch products call count is 1 when view deload happens. Okay, however, because this is an asynchronous code, this is not going to run synchronously, and therefore we need to use expectation to ensure that this function is being fulfilled, because there could be some kind of delay. Okay, so let me show it to you how I write this. So let's come back to the first test. Okay, so what I did over here is that when view deload dot happen, okay, firstly let's come here first, line 43, we create an expectation to say that, hey, the description of this expectation is that fetch products, it should be caught, or fetch products caught. I think that's fine. Okay, we assign this expectation into the product service dot expectation. Alright, so remember, this expectation is an optional here. Okay, so what we are saying is that when view deload happens on the view controller, let's give it an allowance of 1 second to ensure that this expectation is being fulfilled. Alright, so once this expectation is being fulfilled, then we want to check the counter to ensure that it has upgraded, or rather it has increment from 0 to 1. Okay, so if I'm to hit the test, obviously it's going to pass, build succeed, okay, it's gonna suck. Oops, what's the problem here? Let me try that again. What happened? Something happened here. Okay guys, I think it has to do with this teardown thing over here first. Maybe let me just comment this out and let me try to fix that later. Okay, so let's run that right now. I believe this should pass right now. I think maybe I structured something incorrectly. Okay, now it passes over here. Okay, so let's come to this first. Fetch products counter count. Let me just put a breakpoint over here, and then let's run this again. Okay, so you notice that the breakpoint is actually being caught. Okay, so when we hit the resume button, the test succeeded. Okay, however, notice that if I don't put in the expectation, this is going to fail. Okay, so if I hit the play without the expectation, it's going to fail because, as mentioned, this is asynchronous code. That's why we need to have the expectation. Alright guys, I know that this is strange, but I'll try to fix that later. Okay, so now we want to talk about the second scenario is when fetch products happen successfully, the VC's views are updated. Okay, so how are we going to structure this? Let VM output, we have product service to mock the values, meaning to say, okay, if you see over here what mock values are, is basically an array of product, and I'm actually mocking this fetch products function to return these values over here. Alright, so what's happening over here is that we have two expectations when the view deload is being called. When the fetch products is being called. So we have expectation 1, which is set products called, and update view called, which is the other event. Okay, so the way I structured this is that VM output.sync these events. Again, because this is asynchronous as well, we have to use the expectations. So set products will be fulfilled, and update views will be fulfilled when view deload happens. Okay, so over here what I did is that I assert that the view controller will receive this product array. It has a count of 2 because I have 2 products over here. Okay, so let me just hit the play button and let me run this. Okay, test succeeded. However, notice that if I put another one over here, Okay, it can be durian maybe. Let's just run this. You'll notice that it's going to complain that it should be 3 over here. Okay, so let's see what's the error message. 3 is not equal to 2. Okay, if I put in a 3 over here, this should pass. Alright, and I also assert what is the first product. The first product should be an apple. The image name should be apple.view, and then the price should be 10 as specified over here. Alright, okay, so I think this is the second test. So now the third test is that test update view when product added to cart is called. Okay, so when the product is you hit the plus button to add the quantities, we want to update that the cart received those quantities. Okay, so over here we have VM output, we have the selected product. So this apple is the product that we want to add to the cart. Okay, and we want to add that 5 times, for example. Okay, so now product service.mock values, I'm going to pass this as the first product, and then we have the orange as the second one over here. So over here, let's see. So VM output is what is going to be spit out from the VM to the view controller. We are going to test for this update views event that should happen, and that's the reason why if this event does not happen, I'm going to assert that there's a failure here, because we're expecting that whenever a product is being added to cart, the update view is being called on the view controller, or rather the update view event is being sent from the VM to the VC, which should update the view controller. Alright, that's why expecting update view over here. So when quantity did change, we change, meaning to say the user add 5 quantities to this particular product, and over here we set the selected product, which is the apple. Alright, and therefore our assertion is that the number of items in cart should be 5, and the total cost should be 50, because 5 multiplied by the cost of the item 10 is 50, and because the user has not liked the products, I'm going to assert that this dictionary is empty, and the product quantities should specify 5 as well. So for example, if I'm to make this 11, let me just run this again. It's going to complain that total cost fails, so it should be 55. Alright guys, okay, I think that's pretty much all I have. I know this video is a little bit long, so let me try to find out why this works sometimes and why this doesn't work sometimes. I'm really not too sure, to be honest. Like as you see now, this is working okay. Let's run this one more time. Yeah, test succeeded. So I think it might be a race condition somewhere, which I have to probably debug and add that inside maybe the comments of this video. Alright guys, I hope that you kind of enjoyed the overview of this, and okay, it looked like it kind of crashed right now, so I'll have to do some debugging and let you guys know. But yeah, that's all I have to share to basically structure a unit test for Combine. Okay, I hope you like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers and bye.